She was the love of my life and my business partner. Then one morning, I walked into the office and saw something that made everything stop. By the time the dust settled, she had half my company, and I had a plan to destroy hers. For the longest time, I thought I had everything a man could ask for. A growing business I'd built from scratch. A woman I loved and trusted. And a future that looked solid, predictable in the best way. Her name was Elena. We met 5 years ago at a startup networking event. While most people were busy pitching, she actually listened. Sharp mind, quick wit, and that quiet confidence I was drawn in. We started dating, and a year later, she joined my tech company as a co-founder. It felt natural. We worked well together. She handled branding and operations, and I focused on the product and growth. Together, we were unstoppable, or so I thought. Life was busy, sure, but it was the kind of chaos that made me feel alive. We traveled to pitch events, stayed up late fixing bugs, argued over product features, the usual startup madness. But there were also the quiet moments. Take-out dinners on the office floor, laughing over spreadsheets, falling asleep to the hum of our shared ambition. Looking back now, I see the signs, how she started taking more solo meetings, how she'd changed the subject when I asked about her day, how she began guarding her phone, smiling at messages I never saw. But in the moment, I brushed it all off. I told myself we were just busy, tired, focused. That's the thing about trust. When you have it, you don't go looking for proof. And when it breaks everything. It was a Tuesday morning when the first crack turned into a fracture. I walked into the office early, hoping to surprise her with coffee and muffins. Instead, I found her sitting across from a man I didn't recognize, laughing. Not the friendly, casual kind. The kind you hear when someone forgets you exist. She didn't hear me come in. I didn't say a word. I just stood there for a second too long, coffee cooling in my hand, something deep in my chest beginning to twist. I told myself it was nothing. But deep down, something had shifted. I just didn't know yet how much everything was about to fall apart. The man from the office that morning, I convinced myself he was a client, a vendor, maybe someone from a partner company. But that laugh, the way she leaned in toward him, the way his hand lingered on hers when he left, it stayed with me like a thorn. I didn't confront her that day. I didn't say a word. Instead, I started watching, listening, not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't trust what I saw. There's a difference. Over the next 2 weeks, the signs piled up. She started coming home later, said she had investor meetings, ones I wasn't invited to. She changed her passwords, claimed it was a security upgrade. And when I kissed her, she pulled away just a little faster than before. I needed to know. So one night, I followed her. It felt disgusting, like I was breaking something sacred just by checking. But I had to. I needed the truth, even if it broke me. She met him at a quiet wine bar across town, not the kind you go to for business, the kind you go to for secrecy. I watched from across the street as she touched his arm, leaned in close, laughed that same laugh. Then they kissed. Long, slow, familiar, like it wasn't the first time and wouldn't be the last. I drove home in silence. No music, no tears, just this heavy, hollow ache pressing against my ribs. The next morning, I waited until she was at her desk, walked into her office, closed the door behind me, and with a voice I barely recognized, I said, "I saw you with him." She didn't deny it, didn't even blink. Instead, she looked up from her laptop and said, "So what now?" No apology, no guilt, just a flat, emotionless question, like I'd brought up a business decision she'd already made peace with. That was the moment something broke inside me. Not because she cheated, but because she didn't even flinch. She had already left me, long before that kiss. Now I was the one catching up. After that moment in her office, there was no fight, no screaming, no dramatic exit, just quiet. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and left like the conversation didn't even need to finish, like we both knew what was coming next. The breakup felt less like a storm and more like a slow demolition. Piece by piece, everything we'd built started falling apart, the apartment, the routines, the business, especially the business. We had never signed a formal partnership agreement beyond the basics, rookie mistake. Back when we were in love, the thought of dividing things felt absurd. Now it was the one thing we couldn't avoid. Her lawyer was sharp, cold, efficient. Within days, I was served papers claiming that she was entitled to half the company, not just equity, control. Her name was on every document. She de-worked beside me for years. Legally, she was a co-founder. Emotionally, I was the one who felt like the outsider now. I tried to reason with her, told her we could find a middle ground. She barely responded. Everything went through lawyers. She wasn't interested in fairness. She wanted leverage, power. At one point, I asked her, "Why are you doing this? You've already got him. Why take the company too?" She looked at me like I was stupid. "Because I earned it, just like you did." But that wasn't true, not really. I was the one who wrote every line of code, built the product, pitched to investors when she didn't want to fly. She was good, don't get me wrong, but the heart of the company had always come from me. Still, the law didn't care about heart. It cared about signatures. When the dust settled, she walked away with 50% ownership, 4 of our biggest clients and half our staff. She'd even registered a variation of our brand name, 1 letter off for her own spin-off. I sat alone in the office that night, the one we used to share, surrounded by empty desks and silence. It felt like losing her twice. First as a woman, then as a partner, and now as a competitor. I didn't leave the office for 2 days after the split. There was nowhere else to go. The apartment felt haunted, the bars were too loud, and friends, well, most of them were mutual. No one wanted to pick sides. They didn't say it, but I could feel it in their silence. I had gone from being half of a power couple to just the guy who got screwed and couldn't let it go. I slept on the office couch, surrounded by pieces of what used to be my life. The whiteboard still had product notes she'd written. Her chair still had her jacket draped over it. I couldn't bring myself to move it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I stopped answering calls, let the emails pile up, ate whatever junk food I could find in the vending machine downstairs. Everything felt pointless. Every small task, checking the server, replying to a bug report, felt like dragging weights behind me. The worst part, the self-doubt. I kept asking myself questions I didn't want to answer. Was I too focused on the company and not enough on her? Did I push her away? Did I ignore the signs because I was too scared to be alone? Some nights I stared at the ceiling and wondered if she was right. Maybe she did earn it. Maybe I wasn't as essential as I thought. Maybe I was just replaceable. One night I broke. No dramatic moment, no yelling, no breaking things, just a quiet collapse. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and cried in a way I hadn't since I was a kid. Not because I missed her, but because I didn't know who I was anymore without her and the business we built. That's the thing they never tell you about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt, it empties you. It scrapes out your insides until all you're left with is the echo of what used to be. I was still breathing, still waking up each day, but I wasn't living. Not really. And that's when I knew I couldn't stay like this. I had lost everything, but I wasn't done yet. I just didn't know how to start over. Not until someone unexpected walked through the door. It was late afternoon when I heard the door open. I figured it was another delivery or someone from the building. I didn't even look up. "Damn, you look like hell," a familiar voice said. I turned and saw Raj, an old college friend and one of the first people I ever pitched a startup idea to. We hadn't talked in months, maybe longer. He looked at me, then at the half-eaten energy bar on the desk, then at the disaster I called an office. He dropped a coffee in front of me and sat down without asking. We didn't talk much at first. He just let me sit in silence while the caffeine did its thing. Then he asked, "So what now?" I laughed bitterly. "Now, I don't know, maybe I sell off what's left, get a job somewhere, move to another city, start over." Raj shook his head. "Nah, that's not you. I don't exactly have a lot of options, man." "You have the best option," he said, leaning in. "Rebuild, smarter, meaner, better." I stared at him, confused. "You want me to what? Start a new company, compete with her?" "Why not? You built that product. You know the market. You know what customers want. And now you know what betrayal looks like. Use it." It sounded insane. I was exhausted, broke, and emotionally wrecked. But something about the way he said it, not like a suggestion but a challenge, made something flicker in my chest. A spark I hadn't felt in weeks. Still, I hesitated. Even if I tried, I've got no funding, no team, no time. He smiled. "You've got me, I'll help where I can, we'll figure out the rest." That night after Raj left, I sat alone with a blank notebook. I opened it and wrote 2 words at the top of the page. Start over. It was terrifying, and it hurt because this wasn't a dream I was chasing. It was revenge. But maybe that's what I needed. Not to get her back, But to get me back, for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel broken. I felt dangerous. Starting over sounds noble in theory, until you're staring at a bank account that barely covers groceries and a desk covered in scribbled ideas that don't seem good enough. Still, I showed up every day. Same office, same chair, different fire. I knew what I wanted to build, not just a better version of what we'd created, but something leaner, faster, smarter. I took all the mistakes I had ignored the first time and used them as fuel. Every shortcut we had taken, every bloated feature she insisted on, every pitch we fumbled, I tore it all apart and started clean. I didn't have a team, but I had Raj. He handled the marketing side, reached out to old contacts, and even helped sketch out early mock-ups. I did the coding, the design, the customer interviews, everything else. We'd crash on the office floor after pulling 18-hour days, eating ramen and laughing like we were 20 again. But it wasn't easy. There were nights when I doubted everything. Nights when the loneliness crept in, not just missing her, but missing who I was when things were good. The version of me who wasn't angry or obsessed. The me who loved building things for the sake of building, not to prove a point. Some friends thought I was bitter. Maybe I was. But bitterness, I realized, could be a hell of a motivator. I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to rise from the ashes with something undeniable. Something she'd have to look at and realize she never should have underestimated. The first big win came when a former client, one she had poached, reached out. He wasn't happy with her version of the product, said it felt bloated, confused. I showed him what I was working on. He signed within the week. That one client changed everything. It gave me momentum, belief, and most of all, validation. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was growing. Piece by piece, the version of me that had been crushed under betrayal started to come back. Not the same, but tougher, wiser, sharper. She took half the company, but what I was building now, it was going to be all mine. Success doesn't arrive like lightning. It creeps in quiet, steady, undeniable. Within 3 months, we had a working prototype and 5 paying clients. Small ones, sure, but they were loyal. They believed in what we were building. More importantly, they were spreading the word. People were tired of bloated, overhyped platforms. They wanted simplicity, precision, speed. We gave it to them. I started sleeping better, not much, but enough. The anxiety that once lived in my chest began to turn into something else, drive. I still remembered everything she did, the betrayal, the arrogance, the way she looked at me like I was nothing. But now I wasn't haunted by it. I was fueled by it. One day, Raj burst into the office holding his phone like it was gold. She saw us. I looked up from my laptop, confused. What? She just posted on LinkedIn, interesting to see old ideas being recycled. Classic passive-aggressive. She's talking about you. I grinned. For the first time, it didn't sting. It was proof we were getting under her skin. Then the calls started. First from a shared investor who'd backed us both. He wanted to check in on my progress, then from 2 of her clients asking for demos of my new platform. Turns out she'd raised more money than she could handle and promised features her product couldn't deliver. She descaled too fast, rushed the tech, and now people were noticing. At first I wanted to rub it in, call her, send her a screenshot of every lost client, but I didn't need to. She was already panicking. I heard through a mutual friend that she was blaming her developers, firing people, changing strategies, spinning stories about how I stole her ideas, which was funny because I was building the same vision I'd pitched her 3 years ago. But here's the thing, I didn't want revenge anymore, not in the way I thought I did. I wanted to win not just to beat her, but to finally feel like myself again. The builder, the dreamer, the guy who got back up after being burned to the ground. She was watching now, and for the first time. I didn't care. I should have seen it coming. The moment her clients started switching to me, and whispers of her company's decline spread through our circles, I knew she wouldn't go down quietly. She never had. She didn't know how to lose, not without dragging someone else through the mud. So when the cease and desist letter arrived, I wasn't even surprised. She claimed I had copied proprietary code, stolen her branding, violated non-compete agreements. A dozen allegations wrapped in legal jargon meant to do one thing: slow me down, scare me, bleed me dry with court fees. For a split second it worked. I froze. All the old feelings came rushing back, the betrayal, the loss, the fear. I remembered what it felt like to be powerless, to watch everything I built fall apart in someone else's hands. But this time, I wasn't that man anymore. I handed the letter to Raj and said, "Get a lawyer, a real one." We dug through everything, our code base, our contracts, old email threads. Turns out I'd been smarter than I thought. Back when we were still together, I'd archived every version of the product I wrote from scratch with timestamps. Clear evidence of what was mine and what wasn't. Our lawyer crafted the perfect response. Calm, detailed, devastating. We didn't just defend ourselves. We countered. Turns out she had violated trademarks. The name of my new company wasn't just original. It had been registered weeks before she tried to spin off her copycat brand. Her legal team hadn't even caught it. 3 weeks later, her lawsuit was dropped, quietly. No apology, no press, just silence. But the damage wasn't mine this time. It was hers. Investors noticed. Clients noticed. People started asking questions, like why she was wasting resources on lawsuits instead of fixing her product. Meanwhile, my company kept growing, faster than I ever expected. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about progress. She tried to sink me with the same tactics she used to take half my business. But I wasn't standing on shaky ground anymore. I'd built this one on my own, with grit, fire, and scars that finally felt like armor. Word got around. Quietly, slowly, but inevitably, people started to realize what had happened. She wasn't the visionary anymore. She was the ex-founder who got too greedy, too fast, and burned her own ship down trying to sink someone else's. Within months, her platform was bleeding users. The bugs were piling up. Her support team was down to 2 interns, and the investors, they started pulling out, one by one. I watched from a distance. Not gleefully, not with popcorn in hand, waiting to see her crash. Honestly, I didn't feel much at all. I thought I would. I thought I'd feel satisfied, vindicated, maybe even a little triumphant. But when I heard her company had officially shut down, I didn't even smile. There was a time when I would have. A time when revenge felt like the only thing worth chasing. But by then, I'd grown too far past it. I had a team, a real one, not just Raj, but 5 incredible people who believed in what we were building. We were onboarding new clients almost weekly. Our users loved the platform. Investors were reaching out to me now. I wasn't the guy trying to prove something anymore. I was just building, and it felt good, clean, purposeful. And she disappeared from the news feeds, stopped posting, moved to another city. I think the story was over for her. One night, months later, I walked past the old apartment, the one we used to share. The lights were off, curtains drawn, a ghost of a life I didn't recognize anymore. I stood there for a moment, remembering what it felt like to be that version of myself, naive, trusting, hopeful. Then I walked away. Not with a smirk, not with bitterness. Just peace. She had taken half my business, my trust, and nearly my sense of self. But she couldn't take my future. That was something I'd rebuilt from scratch. Brick by brick, scar by scar. And this time, it was unshakable. It started as revenge. I won't pretend it didn't. When she walked away with half my business and a smug smile, I didn't want justice. I wanted to crush her. I wanted her to feel the humiliation I felt waking up alone in an empty office, wondering if I was even worth anything anymore. But revenge has a shelf life. Somewhere along the way, between the sleepless nights, the ramen dinners, and the tiny wins that started to snowball, I stopped building to hurt her and started building to heal me. Now, as I sit in a bright, open office filled with people who believe in our mission, I hardly think about her. Not because I've forgotten what she did, but because it just doesn't define me anymore. We just closed our biggest funding round yet. The kind of deal that would have made us both scream with joy back in the early days. But now I don't need to scream. I just feel calm. Steady. A journalist interviewed me last week. She asked, "What motivated you to start this company?" I paused. I could have told her the real story about the betrayal, the lawsuit, the chaos. But I just smiled and said, I wanted to build something that lasts. And I have. More than the product, more than the revenue, it's the freedom I value now. The freedom to lead without fear. To trust again, this time more wisely. To fail if I must, but on my own terms. Every scar she left became part of the foundation. Not cracks, reinforcements. I look around at my team, laughing over coffee, arguing over product names, chasing bugs and cheering wins, and I realize this isn't about her anymore. This was never just about her. It was about me, and the man I chose to become after everything fell apart. So yes, she cheated. She took half my business. But I built something better. Something she could never take. And in the end, that was worth everything.